ahead.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Wing, and I'm from the very last group. Today, we will go over the story called Mr. Noel. But first, let me introduce my group members. Group number 6 has 4 members, and here are our names and responsibilities. So Thiệu Sang is in charge of the introduction, author, and story summary. Ngọc Mai is in charge of plot, characterization, setting, and tone. Hoa Thay is in charge of theme, point of view, irony, and symbolism. And me, Thanh Nguyên, is in charge of gathering information and building up PowerPoint. In terms of a question discussion, we work together to sort them out. Okay, let's get started. I'll summarize what we're gonna learn today so quickly. First, introduction. Let's take a quick look at the author and the story itself. 2 elements, part 1, we'll go through the plot, characterization, setting, and tone. 3 elements, part 2. So then let us work you through the theme, point of view, irony, and symbolism of the story. And finally, it's time to review what you have learned from the story. Now, Sam will begin.
Thank you, Wing. Good afternoon, everyone. So let's begin our presentation by looking at the background of the writing. So now, Mr. Noel was written by William Somerset Maugham in 1925. So the main character is Mr. Max Callender, who is known as Mr. Noel. So the short story shows a message from the debate between Mr. Callender with Mr. Ramsay about the authenticity of the necklace of Mrs. Ramsay. So speaking of the author, I have a small piece of information I would like to share with you. So William Somerset Maugham was born on the 25th of January 1874 in Paris, France, and he died on the 16th of December 1965 in Nice. So the author, William Somerset Maugham, was an English playwright, novelist, and short story writer. So he was among the most popular writers of his era. So, and reputedly the highest paid author during the 1930s. So I think that's enough. Okay, so now move on to the superstar today. We are going to meet Mr. Noel. So, as you are expected to read this story in advance, so who have read the story, please give me a thumbs up.
Okay, luckily I'm not the only one.
Okay. That's why I laughed. If your teacher knew that, she would be very disappointed. Okay. Okay. Now, well, first of all, I'm going to summarize the story for those who have nothing on it. Okay. So the story goes as follows. So now we are in San Francisco, getting into a boat to Yokohama in Japan. So as the First World War had just ended, so it was too difficult to get accommodations. Therefore, the narrator had to share a cabin with a total stranger on the ship, and he hoped him to be an Englishman. However, instead, he was deeply shocked when he realized it was a Levantine of Oriental origin. So his name was Mac Callender. So a name who doesn't appear to be British, but he was a native of one of the British colonies because he did have a British passport. And Mr. Calendar was like dark-skinned and he looked to come from a country like Spain, Egypt, or Syria. So when the narrator met Mr. Calendar, he disliked him immediately because Mr. Calendar is like sociable, talkative, but unbearable. He always wants to have reasons to show his knowledge. And besides that, there was another dogmatic person on the ship, Mr. Ramsey. So a dogmatic person, like a person who's believe that he is always right and everyone else is wrong. So Mr. Ramsey was going to Japan with his wife for his work. So one evening, the conversation drifted to the subject of pearls. So as Mrs. Ramsay was wearing a chain of pearls, and Mr. Calendar announced that it certainly was a real one, which has probably cost many thousands of dollars, and he was ready to bet $100 on it. On the other hand, Mr. Ramsey, yes, very confident, claimed that his wife had bought it just for $18. So when Mr. Nono was examining the purse, he noticed a very serious and bad appeal in Mrs. Ramsey's eyes. So her face were like begging Mr. Calendar not to reveal the truth about the purse. So then he realized that, oh, Mrs. Ramsey got the purse from her lover from New York. And Mr. Calendar didn't want to destroy the couple. So he ruined his reputation instead. He told everybody that he was wrong and that the pearls were an excellent imitation. So he gave Mr. Ramsey $100. And after that, everybody mocked Mr. Calendar. Later, so while the narrator and Mr. Noel were in their cabin, an envelope was pushed under the door. So there was inside $100 bill from Mrs. Ramsey, and eventually, like it was then that the narrator learned to value the Levantine. He was amazed at Mr. Calendar's generosity. Okay, and that's also in the story. I hope you guys find the story interesting. So now my friends are going to analyze the elements of the story and so that you can have a deeper knowledge of this writing. Thank you, everyone.
So I'm gonna in charge of the plot. And yeah, as you may know, the plot will start first with the unstable situation and end with the following action. With the unstable situation, Mr. Calada and Mr. Ramsey got caught up in a heated argument over pearls, and the rising action took place from when it was revealed that Mr. Calada was actually in the pearl business, over to their $100 bet on the value of Mrs. Ramsey's pearl necklace, and up to the moment when Mr. Calada inspected the piece of jewelry carefully to examine whether he was right or wrong. The climax, the pinnacle of the story, rested on the moment when Mr. Calada had to choose between making a fool out of himself or winning the bet triumphantly and ruining a relationship. And the last part is the following action. This is when Mr. Calada admitted that he was mistaken. So before moving on to the setting, can anyone here who already read the story can tell me the setting of the story? Any volunteer? If not, I will pick randomly. Can I hear the answer from Khánh Linh? Yes. So about the setting of this story, I think that the setting is at the cabin and the ship, and it's where it takes place actually on a passenger ship from San Francisco to Yokohama, and that is the setting of this story.
Yes, exactly. Thank you, Kanlin. That is exactly the setting of place of the story. So yeah. But first of all, I think I would introduce you the setting of the time and the social environment. Um, here's the quote. The war had just finished, and the passenger traffic in the ocean-going liners was heavy. So from this quote, we can easily realize that the story happens in the era after World War, and it also explains why the narrator and Mr. Kalada had to share a cabin because the war had just finished and the traffic on the ocean was heavy. So the accommodation was very hard to get. So you had to put up with whatever the agent chose to offer you. So you could not hope for a cabin to yourself, and one uh, could not but only be thankful when only had to share it with another person. Yeah, two births. Um, Moving on to the setting of place. Yeah, as Kanlin said, through the quote here, it was bad enough to share a cabin for 14 days with anyone. So we can understand that the setting of place takes place in the cabin of a ship sailing across international water. It can be proved by the narrator who states that he must share a cabin or room with strangers for 14 days on the ship. And additionally, within the story, the setting for the story's plot was also firmly established. And so we also add the settings for the unstable situation and the climates. ah, and the quote here is, one evening at dinner, the conversation by chance drifted to the subject of pearls. So the quotation above shows that it occurs in the evening, and the writer chose this moment because it is the perfect time to do dinner. And furthermore, this also implicitly describes the scenario where they met Mr. Ramsey for the first time and then talked about the authenticity of the necklace for Mr. Ramsey in the dining room. And also, through the quotation above, it's clear to see that the setting took place in the dining room when everyone was having dinner and where the heated arguments erupted between the two. So let's take a look at the tone. Yeah. According to our group's perspective, we think that the tone of the story is formal. Uh, you can see the choice of wordings, the exertion of Mr. and Mrs., and how sentences are structured by the writer. With this and this of sarcasm, like the prejudice, the nickname Mr. Know-all, and the mockery in character's line, etc. So, and now is the last part of my presentation is the characterization. And in this part, I want to clarify the four characters here, which are the narrator, Mr. Kalada, Mr. and Mrs. Ramsey. So with the narrator, this person is a character built with prejudice. Although the narrator's main problems are with Mr. Calada, he was at times critical of each of the other characters, with the notable exception of Mrs. Ramsay. It is only in the last sentence that we see some form of respect developed towards Mr. Calada for his actions over Mrs. Ramsay's necklace. Therefore, his character did not stay the same throughout the story. So we think that the narrator is a dynamic flat character. So how about Mr. Calada? Mr. Calada is a successful, widely traveled, talkative businessman, and it is therefore difficult to believe that he does not understand the normal conventions of polite British behavior. And his shipboard informality can perhaps be put down to trying a little too hard to be liked and accepted socially by other passengers. However, what's notable is the fact that despite spending over half of the story acting true to his nickname Mr. Know-All, at the story's climax, his character was shifted. So Mr. Calada is a dynamic ground character. And the two last characters are Mr. and Mrs. Ramsay. Actually, they are characters with only but a few characteristics and did not change their nature throughout the story. So we think that they are static, flat characters. And yeah, so I have just finished my presentation and now it's Kwati's turn.
Okay, thanks, Mai. And I will continue to analyze the remaining elements, including the theme, point of view, symbolism, and the last one is irony. So beginning with the theme, if you read through this story and follow our representation until now, you can obviously find out the theme. And as you can see on the slide, the major theme of the story is prejudice. From the very first paragraph, the narrator expressed his negative feelings about Mr. Calendar, who he must share a cabin on the ship, but no logical reasons, like Sam had said before. And he disliked all about Mr. Calendar, such as his names, his belongings, his appearance, his manners, and even his pride in being British. So there are several symbols. That represent the author's attitude toward prejudice, but I will mainly focus on four main symbols to illustrate this. The first one is the cabin and the closed portholes. I mean the closed window on the cabin, which represent the closed-mindedness of the narrator toward people of different backgrounds. The second one is the label on Mr. Calendar's suitcase, and it has a double meaning in terms of literal meaning. Mr. Calendar traveled a lot, so there were a number of labels from different parts on his suitcase, and I believe that it looks like the badge that demonstrates how many achievements that Mr. Calendar had gained in his life, and the implication is that people put labels on him, so they are prejudiced and they have stereotypes about him. The third one is Levantine term. When the story develops, the narrator turns from referring to Mr. Calendar by his name to using the term Levantine. And I think that which is an assault for Mr. Calendar. It also suggests that narrator prejudice against Mr. Calendar is an example of racism, which is supported by the fact that he also referred to Calendar Oriental smile, and he thought Mr. Calendar may born in Alexandria or Paris, not in British. And the last one is a lack of a name for the narrator. The author did not name the narrator for a purpose that the racist narrator can be any one of us. We may all be guilty of judging people by stereotypes and generalizations rather than we getting to know them and find out their true character. So turning to the point of view. Yeah, the story, the author used the first person point of view. Throughout the story, the narrator relays something that happened around his or herself and shows the predators about Mr. Character origins from the very first paragraph. And in a little more details, I will add something. In the first section, the narrator observes, comments, and trusts Mr. Character by his own eyes. But in the second section, in the next examination, the narrator, like a cameraman, will take photos and write down what he has seen. So in the last session, the narrator discovers Mr. Carter's true character. So in this stage, he undergoes a change in his mind. I mean, he realized that people should not be judged by their look, but their action. And it's the end of the point of view element, coming to symbolism. There are two typical symbols, which are the ship and the purse. The ship is international water, which is a neutral place. The ship becomes the symbol of the world, with people who are prejudiced and even racist. It's similar to the director prejudice. Again, Mr. Calder, as I have analyzed, and the most important symbol in the story is the burns, which represent the idea that appearances can be deceptive because natural pearls are pure on the inside, while the cultural burns are not. And of course, the cultural burns are less valuable than the natural ones. However, on the outside, all burns look the same. So only a closer inspection of a real expert like Mr. Calder can reveal what is real and what is imitation. So we can conclude that people from the same nationality seem the same, but only when we get to know them, we see that each other is different. I know it's too much information for you, but please be patient because it only has one element. The last one, the irony. Yes, in this story, the author used the attributional irony type, which means what they think are not actually true. And you can see easily on the slide on the table. The first one, while the points appear to be fake and had no value, but in the reality, they were actually real and precious. And moreover, in Christian culture, pearls were associated with purity and something beautiful. So Miss Ramsey, the owner of the pearls, who is described as a good person, such as modesty and beauty, but she were actually unfaithful and cheated on her husband, so she turned up to be fake. And in terms of Mr. Calder, he was portrayed as not being correct about the pearls, and so he is considered as a fake Mr. Know-all. But in fact, he was a real expert. He know how to distinguish between the real and the fake one. And the pearls is only the one thing he could truly be said, Mr. Know-all. In addition, Mr. Calder was originally presented as a perfect person who concerned mainly with his appearances. But at the end, we can see that he was sensitive, considerate, and noble. To sum up, we hope that you guys can enjoy this story because it has a deep message. But before showing the next slide, I want to ensure that you guys all understand what I present until now. And I would like to hearing from you. How do you think about the message of the story? Anyone volunteer? How do you think about the message? I will choose someone.
Can I answer your questions?
Yes.
Yes. I think the message from this work is you cannot determine, you cannot give you cannot determine the character of the person through the first impression.
Yes.
Yes, it have to base on a lot of
anything else, Thảo Linh?
This is just my thinking. So.
Yes, you are right. Excellent answer. You mean don't judge a book by its cover, right?
Yes.
Oh yes, thank you. So I will sum up to give you the short message that I will figure out. This story displays the fact that the first impression can be misleading, and sometimes looks can be deceptive, and the truth can be hidden. So we must not judge people according to stereotypes and preconceived prejudices. Like I said before, don't judge a book by its cover. And moreover, the author also wants the reader to have open minds and to be willing to change their minds about some preconceived notions. And that's the end of my presentation. Now it's your turn again, Huyên.
Yes, thank you guys. And now we will go to the questions discussion.
Hello. Okay, Quyên, what's wrong? Being okay? I guess something wrong with your microphone. I cannot hear you properly. Yeah. Yeah. I cannot hear you. I'm not sure how the other ones. The other ones, can you hear Quyên? Hello.
Yes, I can hear, but it's too.
Okay, so we have the 6 questions here. So anybody volunteer for the question number 1? You can share your answer before the groups in charge talks about the answer. How does marking prepare us to be cautious about totally accepting the narrator's attitude toward Mr. Kalada? Mr. Kalada. Yeah, Thảo Linh.
I think as the beginning of the story, the author has described that the narrator disliked Mr. Kalada before he even met him. Besides that, the author also described more things, small things Mr. Kalada does that make the narrator dislike him.
Okay, anybody else want to share your answers? Okay, the group presenting, have you prepared the slides with your answer?
Yeah. Let me show you. Sorry.
Yeah. Turning on. Oh, it seems like you have exactly the same answers as Linh. Yeah. And you can see the very first sentence. I was prepared to dislike Marx Kalada even before I knew him. So yeah, he was, I mean, the author, the narrator was prepared to dislike. Yeah, that's the word. And he used his own word to say that he didn't like Max Kalada. Okay. That's it. So we do see the create prejudice implied here. Okay. Yeah. Come on, let's move on to number 2. The question number 2, the question number 1 was very simple. Okay, you just pick the first line in the story and you can answer that. Number 2, does the description of Mr. Calada's possessions and appearance have to substantiate the narrator prejudice toward him? Anybody volunteer for this? Yeah, I do see somebody volunteer, but I do not see your name. Who is the one volunteering? Who is the one volunteering? Because I just see your student code. I just see your student code 049.
Hi, Miss. Can you hear me?
What's your name?
No.
Okay, so
Yes.
what do you think?
I think the feelings of the narrators about Mr. Callender's change because he saw that.
Okay, the question number 2. The question number 2. The question number 2, we are talking about the description of Mr. Calada's possession and appearance. Does it help to substantiate the narrator's prejudice toward him? We haven't talked about the changes in
Because that Mr. Callender's ready to lose $100.
Come on, what are you talking about? The question number 2. The question number 2.
I'm sorry.
Well, because we haven't come up with the changes in the attitude of the narrator toward Mr. Calada yet. We just talked about the description of his possessions and appearance. Okay, so who else volunteer for this? Who else volunteer for this one?
Yes, miss.
So
Actually, I don't think that the description of Mr. Callender's possession and appearance help to substantiate the narrator's prejudice, because it seems that the narrator doesn't like Mr. Callender at all. Not to mention about his possessions or appearance, he just doesn't like anything about Miss Callender. So doesn't matter whether the description of the possessions or appearance, he just didn't like him. It doesn't help to strengthen anything else. It's just, oh, I don't like him. I don't even like the way he breathes. I don't like his possessions. I don't like his appearance. It's just that.
Okay, so you everyone, you can look at if you have the story with you, you can look at the paragraph number 4, paragraph number 5, and you do see the phrase like, I did not like the look of it. There were too many levels on the suitcases. The wardrobe trunk was too big. He had unpacked his toilet things, and I observed that he was a patron of the excellence. Yeah, I'm using Monsieur Coty. That is a type of French perfume. For I saw on the washing stand his scent, his hair wash, and his freelancing. So everyone, you can see that he does have the judgment here. I did not like the look of it. And let's move on to the next paragraph. You can see Mrs. Calada's brushes. Ebony was his monochrome, a lot of things. And you see, I did not at all like Mr. Calada. Actually, we do have the description, and after the description, we have the judgment from the narrator. And like Nga said before, I do agree with you that we don't need the description of these possessions and appearance to know the prejudice toward Mr. Calada. But the description here by the narrator just emphasize that, make it stronger. You understand? Just successfully describe the strong prejudice of the narrator toward him.
Okay, I understand.
Okay, yeah, let's look at the first 5 paragraphs and you can see that. Yeah, how about the group presenting? Do you have other different? Okay, yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's good. That's right. That's just like exactly what I told you before. Okay, so let's move on to the question number 3, girls and boys. Yeah. Okay. Hello. Hey. Okay, the question number 3. Sorry, everyone. Today something not good. Although Mr. Kaleda says that his British to the backbone, wouldn't the phrase ordinarily apply more appropriate to the narrator? Why? Or is the conclusion a story an ironic verification of Mr. Kaleda's self-characterization? Anybody want to share the idea to this question? Anybody want to share?
Can you
again?
No. Can you please explain the question?
Okay, so I need the group to explain because they do examine this. So the group presenting, would you please help explain this to Nga and those who haven't been clear of this? Hey, the group presenting, where are you? I expect that you understand the question.
Yeah.
Hey, Wing.
Yeah.
Yeah, can you explain?
Can you hear me?
Yes, but not very, it's not loud enough, I guess. Okay, now that's much better.
Yeah. Okay. I think like the question means the narrator doesn't have to introduce Mr. Canada, and Mr. Canada has to introduce his nationality by himself. Like he has to say that he's British.
Okay, so for the first part, wouldn't the phrase ordinarily apply more appropriately to the narrator? So who is the narrator in this case? Who it is narrator in this case? That is the author, right? The author is the